Let's get straight into it. So how did you get into the bounty hunting game? A very interesting line of work.
Well, I guess it started back when I started repossessing cars, boats, RVs, and I'll take a wedding ring if you got one you need.
And you've obviously seen a big rise in sort of truck hijackings and the need for your sort of services.
Absolutely, no. You know, back in '07 when the economy started to fail in the U.S., you know, crime was on the rise. So, you know, somebody's got to be willing to go out there and track that stolen merchandise down. Not too many are, so, you know, it's fitting for us.
So is this quite a niche sort of role you perform? Not too many other guys doing what you do?
No, absolutely, yeah. I don't know if it's fear, lack of, I don't know, maybe I lack adrenaline. There's not too many guys out there to do it. You know, when I get called across the United States, you know, to fly 800 miles away to pick up a load for somebody, you know, I mean, they had to cross over many repossession agents in their own area to, you know, and go through the expense of flying me in. So, yeah, I mean, you know, it feels pretty good.
So are you almost sort of the last line of defense for a company trying to get goods back?
Yeah, I mean, what do they do? You know, they call the cops. Of course, they got to make a police report, but, you know, in all hopes, we can track down their load first. You know, the cops pick it up. It's going to sit in impound for 6 months. And, you know, not only knows what's in that container that, you know, somebody's waiting on, right?
Well, what's the weirdest thing you found in a container?
The weirdest thing? I would say my son and I performed the repossession on a rig that had full of sex toys.
And you knew did you know what you're getting? You knew that was what you're getting yourself in for.
No, never.
You don't know what's in there.
Rarely do we know what the load contains. You know, we get a description of the truck, the driver, and, you know, their last known location. Unless it's something of, say, national security, you know, or a deadly chemical, no, we usually don't know.
And have you done many hazardous goods over the years?
We have, yeah.
Toxic, nuclear waste, a whole lot.
I wouldn't go nuclear waste. You know, we did recover a load of unarmed nuclear warheads. Okay. They were obviously unarmed. They were hijacked en route to another spot in Ohio where they would become armed.
Absolutely, and you had a bit of a checkered past. How did you get from the other side of the law to this side of the law, where you're chasing the criminals, if you will? I
had to choose, right? I mean, it was kind of an easy decision for me. I watched the TV program, probably 15 years ago. It was a documentary on the repossession industry, and I knew right then that, you know, that was work for me. You know, I have no problem going out there creeping through the darkness and tricking people out of their vehicles. I don't get scared. I don't know why. I just don't. I think that maybe I don't possess that.
And so it doesn't sound like there's too many rules of the trade. You just kind of do what works.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to do, bud? They're going to call the cops on me for recovering a vehicle that they obviously stole. So no, I don't. You know, I mean, if it's a large company, they need us to recover a truck from an employee. Of course, we follow guidelines. But if you're talking hijacking, stolen merchandise, nah, it's fair game, man. I'm gonna break every rule in the book.
You've probably broken a few bones as well along the way.
Yeah, we have, but we've also had a few bones broken along the way.
And I see you're a big MMA fan. Did you train? Did that come in handy when you're taking guys down?
I trained some years of karate back in the day, but yeah, I would say watching and being a fan of MMA has helped me a lot when it comes to physical altercations. But I kind of grew up in the streets fighting, you know, and I spent 5 years in the penitentiary where I was a pretty young white boy, and you better know how to fight, and if not, you're going to learn real quick. So, you know, I'd say my training mostly came from the School of Hard Knocks, brother.
Absolutely. And speaking of School of Hard Knocks, your partner Vince, a very interesting dynamic there.
Yeah. Vince and I have been tight since we were, I want to say, 5 years old. Yeah, we shared the same daycare, and from that point on, man, we've been in trouble ever since together. And it wasn't that we were bad kids. We just, when you put two brains together that function like ours do, it kind of got us into some mischief along the way. But yeah, we spent a lot of years running from the law and doing things we shouldn't have been doing. Now we're back on track. We're 45 years old. Hell, we better be.
And so how do those unique experiences help you become the top of the tree in the bounty hunter game?
Well, I'd like to say I know how most of these guys think. Whether it's a guy trying to hide a vehicle from his employer, or a guy that's stolen a load. Like I said, I like to know. I like to think I know what these criminals think, and if they're trying to trick somebody, how they're going to go about it. 'Cause I've been there once. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how did you get the call for the show?
Well, it's kind of funny. We were actually in the middle of a repossession out of a truck stop in Ohio, and there was a film crew that was filming a different show. Producer was outside having a cigarette, and he started filming us with his iPhone in the middle of this recovery. And the ironic thing was that we actually, one of my tricks, which I shouldn't share, but I will, is we'll carry a video camera with us. And what we'll do is we'll approach, if there's a driver sitting in a truck stop, and he's in the truck, and I need to get him out, rather than go through the whole physical altercation. He might have guns, whatever. There's a lot of dogs. I'll approach the vehicle and tell him that we're doing a documentary on America's top drivers. And, would he mind stepping out and, standing by the front of the truck and letting us interview him? 99 out of 100 guys, they want part in that. So, yeah, the guy hopped out. We were doing a phony interview. I hopped in the rig, locked the door, fired her up. Vince contained him while I was packing all of his personal effects. And once I got all his belongings, I rolled the window down, handed Vince the bag. Vince handed him a Greyhound bus ticket to get home, and we were about ready to pull out, and this producer run up and said, did what I think just happened happen? And I said, well, if you think we just took a guy's truck, then yeah. We spent probably 3 hours that day on the phone with him, and next thing I knew, he had a film crew down here wanting to shoot a pilot. They came from Hollywood. They followed us, just straight up documentary for a while, and no production at all, just to give the networks an opportunity to see what we do in real time. So, yeah, that's how it all got started.
And is it still as authentic as it was in the beginning?
Of course not. A lot of people, anytime they hear the word reality, they automatically think it's fake. And I know why they think that, because I was one of those. But, there is production that goes into these shows. Otherwise, you'd probably be bored to tears watching it. There's times where they might say, will you two talk about this while you're driving? Because they know it's going to get us in an argument. They don't I've never read a script a day in my life, okay, and I never will. But, they do prompt us to talk about things. They do little things to make the show more interesting. But overall, if you see us recovering a load, we're really recovering that load.
So how does it work, recovering the load with the cameras there, and how does that dynamic work?
Yeah, it does. It's awkward. It's very distracting. Typically, a crew is about, the last shot we did, there was close to 40 crew members.
It's a big crew.
So, you've got minivan after minivan trailing you. You've got one of the producers along with 2 camera guys and a sound guy in the back of the rig. You nail the brakes, they come flying out of the top bunk with camera equipment in hand. It's distracting, and not just that, but it's really hard when you know you're under the microscope like that in your everyday life. I mean, imagine you going to work today and your entire 8-hour shift is under the scrutiny of camera.
Yeah.
You know, if I pick my nose, the whole world may see that.
Absolutely. So it's a bit of an adjustment. I mean, there must be a bit of a life changer then for you, getting noticed all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah. You know, people come up to me on the streets and tell me how much they love the show. You know, I've gotten absolutely zero negative feedback. So yeah, I mean, it's cool, and I like people, and I'm out there a lot in the biker community, you know, and it's cool.
But did you find that the crew obviously blows your cover sometimes?
They do, a lot, not just sometimes. We've had our fair share of arguments, you know, out there on the job. I tell them, no, you're not coming, you're not filming this. You can start filming at this point, but I need to get in here, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't need your camera guy tripping me up or this or that happening. But, you know, no matter what you say to them, they promise, yes, we'll stay back, and next thing you know, they're right on your heels. So, yeah, I lost a couple loads due to the camera crew, but, you know, I also made a lot of friends.
I'm sure you made a bit of money along the way as well.
There's not as much money as a guy would think, you know. But when you're talking reality television, you better be Snooki or JY or, you know, you better be
or Richard Rawlings.
If you're planning on making any kind of money. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's why I got into whole television end of it. You know, I thought, well, you know, there's a greater good in the future, and yeah, you know, it is what it is.
Would you ever have your own show?
Well, Big Rig Bounty Hunters originally was supposed to be the Shawn and Vince show. You know, that was it. The network came back and said, we want competition in there. So, you know, they went out and tried to find other guys, but, you know, it's a very niche, you know, career. So you've got very few guys in the United States are willing to do what we do. They have a lot of trouble. I mean, it's easier to find these guys, and most of them were active truck drivers with a little repossession experience. People were trying to break into the business, you know, whatnot. We were the only veterans out there, and, you know, it was like taking candy from a baby.
And can you talk about some of the characters like Korchenko, the wrestler? Looks like quite an interesting dude.
Yeah, Marshall and Korchenko. You know, I never got to see those guys a whole lot, none of the cast, other than season 2 when they brought in competition locally on it. Obviously, I had my fair share of run-ins with them, but as far as the Texans, you know, I met them one time out in Hollywood at a gathering. Other than that, you know, we're friends. I like the guys, great-hearted people. But yeah, interesting.
It's business at the end of the day.
It is.
And what do you put the success of the show down to?
I would say people just liking to see what other people do. You know, people enjoy watching other people put their lives at risk. You know, I guess the thrill of will this poor son of a bitch die today doing his job? Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think what I do is pretty boring, except for the 20 seconds of adrenaline when it finally all goes down. You know, it might take us 24, 48 hours to recover a load, but what you're going to see is the 10 minutes of adrenaline. You know, or not 10 minutes, but 10 seconds. You know, I mean, it's literally, it's bam, bam, and usually they're over with, and I'm driving down the road, and, you know.
So you're in the car for 2 days with Vince. How do you avoid sort of slitting each other's throats?
We've been avoiding that since we were 5 years old, man. Hey, I guess he knows how to push my buttons out. Push him, but we both know how to push the pause button when it's going too far. So we've actually never even came to blows. We've gotten close. You know, the one time we did, just know I put him on the back.
I'm sure you guys, speaking of back, you've got to have a few back-to-backs in the bar, you know.
Oh, man, yeah. Fighting each other we've never done, but fighting with each other as a team, yes, many, many times.
So any memorable brawls that come to mind?
Oh, there was one, it wasn't too many years, about 3 years ago, we were in a local bar, and Vince and I used to run in the group that, we commanded respect in the local bars. Well, now we're old, right? And there's these up-and-comers that wear their hats sideways and their pants are falling off their hats, and, they're running the bars now. So, Vince and I had just come from a UFC fight in Columbus. We had our old ladies with us, and Vince, long story short, Vince spilled a beer on one of their girls. Some mouths got to running, and it was 5-on-2. And, yeah, we took care of business, man, and that felt good.
Shit.
Took care of business at our age.
And what's your favorite submission?
I would have to say the arm bar.
You must have done it a few.
Rear naked choke. I like the rear naked choke because you're going to sleep. You're going to lay her down and take a nap. The arm bar, you're going to tap her, it's going to snap.
And some big fights coming up for Rockhold Weidman. Who you got in that one?
I got to stick with Weidman, man. They doubted him, and he took out every legend of the sport. So he's the Brazilian killer. I mean, you got to stick with him. What he just did to Beetle.
Absolutely. And Ola McGregor?
God, McGregor's mouth, I really want to see him lose drastically, but on the other hand, I think he would make a great champion. Aldo's a quiet champion. He's not a people's champion. I think McGregor would be. So I guess in a way, I'm rooting for him.
Absolutely. And do you ever teach any up-and-coming bounty hunters the tricks of the trade?
Well, I have 3 sons, all in their 20s, so they've been rolling with me since they were probably too young to roll with me. They've learned, they've seen things that most grown men will never see in their life, and they've experienced a lot of craziness, and they know the business. I could send any one of my 3 sons out to do a recovery tonight if I'm tired.
So all 3 of them can throw hands.
All 3 of them.
And how would you rate the level of truck driving in the USA?
That's a tough one for me. I'm not an actual driver. I've had my license for about 20 years, my CDL license. But when I got my license, it was to do short hauls for my dad's construction company, hauling heavy equipment. I never usually went any further than 60 miles. So to call myself a trucker, I think it takes a trucker to rate truck driving in America. I'll pick up a load and drive it 700 miles and drop it off, but I'm probably the guy that should be getting rated on the road, because I'm not the experienced over-the-road veteran. But overall, I would say for our traffic, the infrastructure, it works well. And, for the millions of rigs that are out there, there's not that many deadly accidents in comparison. And
when I watch Discovery TV, the cops are always fucking there. Are there really that many cops in America?
Yeah, there really are that many cops in America. They're the biggest gang in America. Absolutely.
That's in weed, man.
I can drive for 30 minutes in my vehicle and I might pass 10 cops.
10 cops. And
I might pass 10 cops in one location.
And do you ever think of taking the show on the road, international?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I mean, those opportunities, they just haven't come.
As you know, in Africa, there's a few renegades out there getting a few loads here and there.
Oh, I know. I believe it.
Yeah, and you could almost have a world championships, get fucking heavies from around the world and see who's got the biggest balls.
Hey, man, it might just be stupidity, but I'll always win that competition. I'm not afraid of nothing or nobody.